My name is Todd Banhazl, and I am the cinematographer on Winning Time.
Once, twice, no harm, no foul.
I got involved in Winning Time because I knew about the pilot, and it sounded like a really exciting project. Me and Adam McKay spoke about the pilot and had a really similar, exciting idea on how we wanted to do it, and we're really aligned. And once it went to series, I was just ready to kind of move forward and take it on to its full potential.
Yeah, stop Moses. At this point in your career, maybe he's just too physical for you.
It's one game.
The show is referencing a time in American culture that we all remember really well, and we remember it in images and in footage from that time period. So it felt like a really fun way to harken back to the period by trying to shoot on the formats that they actually used, like 16mm for archival and 8mm for real archival and 35mm for the show, and also the same video cameras that shot the basketball games on television, actually using those cameras. So the bulk of the show is shot on Panavision 35mm cameras using Primo lenses, which are kind of like our hero base. They're telling the story the way that epic Showtime era wants to be told. But then beyond that, we're mixing in other formats such as 16mm in color and black and white to kind of strip it down and make it feel like archival or more emotional. And we're also shooting 8mm film to make it feel like even more true archival, like it was footage found in a little bin labeled Lakers 1985 that had been forgotten for 40 years, you know? And then we're also shooting on these tube cameras from the 70s that actually shot the basketball games. We're using those for narrative purposes. In season 2, we started shooting on VHS cameras. We called it Dad Cam to make it feel like real kind of gross 80s archival. And in this sequence, the spinning basketball shot on Rollerblades is shot on 16mm on a very wide lens, so it can be very close on a Zeiss 12 or 16mm lens. And then the second part of the sequence where we're spinning around the actors is shot on Steadicam on a very long lens, Primo, 35mm, probably 100mm or 125mm. We always wanted to push it so that the lens was almost too long to be operated on. It was almost too bumpy or too long or too hard to keep in focus so that you really feel like the camera's about to fall off the rails or something, and there's an energy in that, you know? It was kind of about creating a memory of what this footage looked like and then break it down into things that are more emotional. There's a lot of mythos about who Larry Bird was and where he came from, so the idea was to kind of film him like our big Western bad guy, but at the same time emotionally connect with him. So we kind of balance between these low angle, wide kind of Western push-ins on him and also this very long lens documentary, very present with him. I think we always photographed Magic like the superstar that he felt he was. There was a joy in the camera buying into all the bravado that Magic had. There's either the big crane downs into him or it's the really long lens off axis. It was about showing him as cocky as possible and also as kind of stripped down and human as possible. When we read the script, it was 1 or 2 lines and it said, Magic and Bird make their way through the playoffs and it feels like they're playing each other. And I remember my director Sally and I looked at it and we said, this is 2 lines, but this is gonna take days of shooting. This is a huge sequence because it's how do you show them making their way up the ranks, moving through multiple teams across a season. And that's how we started the idea of, oh wow, what if it's they're passing and shooting and playing literally to each other across games. So once we knew that, it became about planning how to actually accomplish that. In this sequence, we're tracking the real teams that they played, the way that the playoffs went, but at the same time, then we're kind of blurring it so that emotionally, it's like they were playing each other. The rollerblade camera became our secret weapon. It was our way to keep up with the players. Finally, we had a device that could really move at the pace and move inside the game, and we started actually blocking and rehearsing our rollerblade operator like he was another player. So the rollerblade camera is our operator, John Like, with a little backpack rig and a little 16mm camera. It's just a way for him to kind of be really in the game and fly around. It's 16mm, so it can be more visceral and in the game and also kind of feel like archival footage, but then we're flying around with the players, so we're kind of breaking that rule, you know? We're doing things that the archival camera couldn't actually do. This sequence in particular, because it has to span all these different cut points where it looks like they're passing or shooting to each other, we'd get the plays up and rehearsed, then they'd show it to my director and I, and then we would look at it with our operators. We iPhoned it very carefully and then actually edited it on an iPhone to make sure that all the hidden cut points would kind of work as glue. Two things need to happen. One is you need to understand that you were traversing through multiple stadiums. You were moving between the Garden or the Forum, and it's not only like the basketball floor, which we switched out, or the seating, it's also the quality of light. The Forum was like a Showtime white light, almost like it's like a stage production or like a rock and roll show. And then the Celtics Garden was like this pissy amber orange, it's much older and it's in Boston. And we shot all the basketball on one single 360 green screen stage. We had LED lighting from above that was all like kind of hard LED lighting meant to replicate the most brutal, ugly stadium lighting we could push. The other thing is because our heroes were being put head to head is we kind of took the lighting and just like amped it up. I kind of felt like we were trying to make it look like the lighting had been plugged into like a car battery. Everyone's faces are like nearly blown out. Everything's overexposed, too bright, 4 or 5 backlights at the same time. We're trying to light the sweat, really trying to be like the most violent as possible so that it was like the most exciting as possible. The sweat was one of the hardest challenges of the whole show, I think. The problem is if the sweat drips down onto the court, then the court's slippery, so you have to stop. There was also like a lot of magic going on in the makeup department of like kinds of sweat. There was kind of like a stickier, more like gluey sweat that didn't drip, that felt like it would be very uncomfortable for our heroic actors, but it was a mix of that and actual spray. So I don't know, it's just like a epic task getting these players to look the right kind of shine. We're always running flashing photo lights when things are happening in the game that are exciting, but I think we quadrupled the amount of like the speed of the photo flashes. So it's just everything is amped up so that it looks the way it feels for these two men. We limited ourselves to the kind of things that were photographically possible back then. So we underexposed the film, we post-processed the film, we didn't dust bust the negatives, so all the hairs were left in the film, kind of the scratches and hairs, and then digitally we destroyed it kind of even further. It was about kind of making it feel like it was all archival footage that we had rescued. Beyond that, it was about working with our visual effects team, who were so brilliant, because again, it was about making visual effects that not only look real, but they look real like the way they would have been photographed back in that era. For example, like all the photos of the games back then, the crowds are very dark, whereas the players on the court are very bright. And part of that is because the lights were so bright, the cameras that were filming them at the time couldn't expose to the crowds in the dark background. So it was about working with visual effects and making it so that it's not only do the crowds look real, but actually they look quite dark and quite hard to see, as if they were shot on cameras back at that time.
19 points for...
I'm very critical of my work. I do think when I look at this sequence, I'm happy because I remember how hard it was and I know how many brilliant people it took to make it come together. Production design, my operators, the lighting, the editors, the visual effects, everyone came together to make this work. And the amount of meetings and rehearsals to get it there. And when I look at it, it almost looks easy, like it almost looks invisible, which I think that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of the whole team.